Karen's first taste of freedom lasted exactly 4 hours and 37 minutes. She'd driven to the Motel 6 on Highway 34, the only place that accepted cash and didn't ask questions about why a middle-aged woman in a bathrobe was checking in at dawn with a traumatized cat and a stolen HOA sign. The room smelled like cigarettes and broken dreams, but Karen had never felt more liberated until she tried to access her bank account. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your accounts have been frozen pending investigation of theft charges," the bank teller explained with the kind of professional sympathy reserved for the clinically insane. "You'll need to contact the authorities to resolve this matter." Karen's perfectly maintained composure cracked like cheap veneer. "Theft charges? I am the HOA president. That sign belongs to me." "Actually, ma'am, according to our records, you were removed from that position yesterday evening." The new president, Janet Peterson, filed the complaint this morning. Janet Peterson. The name tasted like poison in Karen's mouth. Sweet, harmless Janet with her organic vegetable garden and her rescue dogs and her insufferably cheerful demeanor. Janet, who'd smiled and nodded through every board meeting while secretly plotting Karen's downfall. Back at the motel, Karen's situation deteriorated rapidly. Without access to her accounts, she couldn't pay for another night. The desk clerk, a teenager with purple hair and zero patience for dramatic middle-aged refugees, gave her until checkout time to settle her bill or face eviction. "This is insane," Karen muttered, pacing the cramped room while Mr. Whiskers watched with judgmental green eyes. "I built that community. I protected their property values. I maintained their standards." Her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror told a different story. Hair askew, mascara smudged, bathrobe stained with coffee and desperation. She looked like exactly what she'd become, a woman who'd lost everything over a wooden sign and wounded pride. The knock on her door came at 11:58 a.m., 2 minutes before checkout. Karen Mitchell? The police officer was young, probably fresh out of the academy, with the kind of earnest expression that reminded Karen of her nephew before he'd grown up and stopped visiting. "I'm Officer Rodriguez. We need to talk about some missing HOA property." Karen's heart hammered against her ribs. Through the window, she could see Janet Peterson standing beside the police car, arms crossed, wearing the exact expression Karen had used when confronting rule-breaking neighbors. "That woman," Karen hissed, pointing at Janet, "orchestrated a coup. She stole my position, my authority, my entire life." Officer Rodriguez glanced at his notes. "Ma'am, I'm just here about a sign. A wooden sign worth approximately $300 that was taken from community property without authorization." $300. Karen's entire rebellion, her dramatic escape from suburban tyranny, had been reduced to a misdemeanor theft charge over $300. "I have rights," she protested. "I have documentation. I have." "You have the right to remain silent," Officer Rodriguez said gently, reaching for his handcuffs. Karen Mitchell crouched behind her prized hydrangeas at 3:47 am, clutching a bolt cutter like her life depended on it. The metal gleamed under the streetlight as she prepared to sever the chain securing the property of HOA sign to the community entrance gate. 23 years she'd lived in this suburban prison. 23 years of following their ridiculous rules, their tyrannical demands, their soul-crushing regulations about grass height and mailbox colors. But tonight, everything changed. "This is it, Mr. Whiskers," she whispered to her cat, who sat perched in the passenger seat of her idling Honda Civic, engine running, ready for their midnight escape. "We're finally breaking free." The chain snapped with a satisfying click, and Karen felt a rush of euphoria she hadn't experienced since her college rebellion days. She grabbed the heavy wooden sign and hurled it into her backseat, nearly crushing poor Mr. Whiskers, who let out an indignant yowl. "Sorry, baby. Mama's got to make a statement." As HOA board president for the past 5 years, Karen had enforced every petty rule with religious fervor. She issued violations for Christmas lights staying up past January 2nd, for garden gnomes exceeding the 3-inch height limit, for driveways that weren't pressure washed weekly. She'd been the neighborhood's most feared resident, armed with a measuring tape and an arsenal of citation forms. But 3 hours ago, everything had changed when she'd received the letter. The letter that would destroy everything she'd built, everything she'd sacrificed for this community. The HOA board, her board, had voted to remove her as president, effective immediately. Insubordination, they'd called it, exceeding authority, creating a hostile environment. All because she tried to implement her masterpiece, mandatory weekly home inspections with surprise entry privileges for board members. It was brilliant, foolproof, the ultimate evolution of neighborhood oversight. Apparently, the other board members disagreed, violently. Karen peeled out of the community entrance, gravel spraying behind her like confetti at a twisted celebration. In her rearview mirror, Willowbrook's perfectly manicured lawns and identical beige houses grew smaller. The community that had been her kingdom, her purpose, her entire identity, was now just another set of disappearing taillights. We're free, Mr. Whiskers. Free from their tyranny, their backstabbing, their... Her phone buzzed with a text from Janet Peterson, the new board president. Karen, return the sign immediately. The police have been notified. Karen laughed maniacally and hurled her phone out the window, watching it shatter against the asphalt. No more HOA meetings. No more violation reports. No more power struggles over whether beige was too bold for exterior trim. She was finally free to live life on her own terms. If only she'd bothered to read the fine print in her HOA contract before making her dramatic exit. The Willowbrook police station's holding cell smelled like disinfectant and shattered dreams. Karen sat on the narrow bench, still wearing her coffee-stained bathrobe, watching Officer Rodriguez complete his paperwork with maddening deliberation. Mr. Whiskers had been temporarily relocated to the station's break room, where he was reportedly being spoiled with tuna sandwiches by sympathetic officers. At least someone was having a good day. Mrs. Mitchell, Detective Sarah Chen settled across from her in the interview room, a thick folder spread between them. Chen was perhaps 40, with sharp eyes and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that Karen had once admired in herself. Let's talk about your relationship with the Willowbrook Homeowners Association. My relationship? Karen laughed bitterly. I was the HOA. I dedicated 5 years of my life to maintaining community standards, protecting property values, ensuring compliance with our regulations, and they repaid me with betrayal. According to these complaints, Chen flipped through several pages. You've been cited for harassment, trespassing, intimidation, and abuse of authority. Multiple residents filed formal grievances against your methods. Karen's face flushed. I enforced the rules. That's what board presidents do. You installed security cameras pointed at neighbors' windows. You conducted unauthorized wellness checks by entering homes without permission. You issued violations for infractions like suspicious outdoor furniture arrangement and unapproved garden gnome facial expressions. Details matter, detective. Standards exist for a reason. Chen leaned forward. Karen, help me understand. What happened yesterday that made you feel stealing HOA property was your only option? The question hit Karen like a physical blow. She closed her eyes, remembering the phone call that had shattered her world. Board member David Kim's voice, carefully neutral. Karen, the vote was unanimous. We feel it's time for new leadership. Your removal is effective immediately. Unanimous. Even Margaret Walsh, whom Karen had personally helped through her messy divorce. Even Bob Henderson, whose property value she protected by reporting his neighbor's fence violation. Even sweet Janet Peterson, who'd seemed so grateful for Karen's guidance. They voted me out, Karen whispered. After everything I'd done for them, all my sacrifices, all my dedication, gone. What sacrifices? The words poured out like water through a broken dam. Her marriage had ended 3 years ago when Richard finally admitted he couldn't live with her obsession with HOA business. Her daughter hadn't called in 6 months, tired of hearing about neighborhood politics. Her only friends were other board members, and even they'd grown distant as Karen's enforcement became increasingly aggressive. I gave them everything, Karen said, voice breaking. My time, my energy, my relationships. I thought if I could just maintain perfect order, perfect compliance, then everything else would fall into place. I thought they respected me. Detective Chen's expression softened slightly. When did you last take a vacation, Karen? When did you last do something just for fun? Karen stared at her hands. She couldn't remember. The sign was symbolic. She finally admitted, if I couldn't be their president, if they didn't want my protection, then maybe I could at least take back one piece of what I'd given them. And how's that working out for you? Through the interview room window, Karen could see Janet Peterson in the waiting area, speaking earnestly with Officer Rodriguez, probably discussing community security, proper procedures, all the responsibilities Karen had once held sacred. Janet looked competent, professional, everything Karen had thought she was, everything Karen had apparently never been. 3 months later, Karen Mitchell sat in Dr. Amanda Wright's office, no longer the woman who'd once terrorized Willowbrook with measuring tapes and citation books. The bathrobe had been replaced by jeans and a comfortable sweater. Her hair was softer, less severe. Most importantly, her hands weren't clutching a clipboard. "How was your week?" Dr. Wright asked, settling into her chair with the kind of patience that had slowly taught Karen the difference between being heard and being obeyed. "Complicated," Karen admitted. "I got a job." "That's wonderful." "Where?" "The animal shelter. It's just part-time, helping with administrative work and cat socialization." Karen smiled slightly. "Apparently, Mr. Whiskers put in a good word for me." The job had come through Officer Rodriguez's mother, who'd remembered their conversation and thought Karen might benefit from working with creatures who didn't care about her past mistakes. The pay was minimal, but Karen found unexpected peace in the simple routine of feeding schedules and medical charts, organization with a purpose that actually helped rather than controlled. "I've been thinking about what Janet said," Karen continued, "about the difference between helping and controlling. I always told myself I was protecting the community, but really, I think I was protecting myself." "From what?" Karen stared out the window at the parking lot. When normal people lived normal lives without needing to regulate every detail. From being irrelevant. From not mattering. After Richard left, after Emma stopped calling, the HOA was the only place where people needed me, or at least where I convinced myself they needed me. The revelation had come gradually, through weeks of therapy and uncomfortable conversations with Lisa. Karen's devotion to community standards hadn't been about service. It had been about significance. Every violation she'd reported, every rule she'd enforced, every meeting she'd dominated had been her way of proving she mattered. "Have you thought about reaching out to Emma?" Dr. Wright asked gently. Karen nodded. "I wrote her a letter, haven't sent it yet." She pulled out her phone, showing a draft email that had been rewritten dozens of times. "I keep trying to explain everything that happened, but it sounds crazy even to me. What would happen if you just apologized? No explanations, no justifications, just acknowledgement of how your behavior affected her?" The suggestion terrified Karen more than facing arrest had. Apologizing meant admitting she'd been wrong, that her carefully constructed worldview had been built on quicksand. But it also meant the possibility of rebuilding something real. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Karen, this is David Kim from the old board. Heard about your new job. The cats are lucky to have you. Hope you're doing well." Karen stared at the message, surprised by the kindness. Over the past month, she'd received similar texts from Margaret and Bob, brief messages that suggested forgiveness might be possible. "There's something else," Karen said, pocketing her phone. "Janet asked if I'd like to volunteer for the community garden project. Nothing official, just helping plant vegetables for the food bank. How do you feel about that?" Karen considered the question. The old Karen would have immediately started planning optimization strategies, efficiency improvements, expansion possibilities. This Karen just felt interested. "Scared," she admitted. "But good scared. Like maybe I could contribute something without needing to control everything." As she left Dr. Wright's office, Karen's phone buzzed again. This time it was Emma, responding to the carefully worded text Karen had finally sent that morning. "Mom, got your message. I'm proud of you for getting help. Would you like to have coffee next week? I'd like to hear about the cats." Karen stopped walking, reading the message 3 times before it sank in. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. A door opening just wide enough to let in sunlight. Outside, the afternoon sun painted everything in warm gold. Somewhere across town, the Willowbrook HOA was probably conducting their monthly meeting without her, making decisions about fence regulations and landscaping standards. For the first time in 5 years, Karen didn't feel the urge to know what they were discussing. She had her own life to figure out. But first, she had cats to feed and a daughter to call back. It wasn't the life she planned, but it was real, and it was hers. Mr. Whiskers was waiting in the car, patient as always, ready for whatever came next. To be continued. The phone call to Karen's sister Lisa was the hardest conversation of her life. "You want me to bail you out of jail?" Lisa's voice carried 20 years of accumulated frustration. "Karen, what the hell happened to you?" Sitting in the police station's courtesy phone booth, Karen struggled to find words that didn't sound completely insane. "It's complicated. The HOA board staged a hostile takeover, and I may have overreacted slightly." "Overreacted how?" "I stole that entrance sign and tried to flee town with Mr. Whiskers." The silence stretched so long Karen wondered if the call had dropped. "Lisa? I'm here. I'm just processing the fact that my sister, the woman who once spent 3 hours explaining proper lawn mowing techniques at Thanksgiving dinner, is calling me from jail." Karen closed her eyes. "Will you help me?" Another pause. "I'll be there in 2 hours. But Karen, we're going to have a serious conversation about getting you some help." While waiting for Lisa, Karen was allowed to sit in the break room with Mr. Whiskers, who had apparently charmed the entire police force. Officer Rodriguez brought her coffee and a surprisingly decent sandwich from the deli next door. "You know," he said, settling into the chair across from her, "my mom was HOA president for 8 years. Nearly drove her crazy too." Karen looked up sharply. "Excuse me? All that responsibility, all those complaints, all those people expecting you to solve problems that can't really be solved." She used to come home stressed out of her mind, talking about fence heights and parking violations like they were matters of national security. "What happened to her?" Rodriguez smiled. "She got voted out. Best thing that ever happened to her. Now she volunteers at the animal shelter and takes pottery classes. She's actually happy." Before Karen could respond, Detective Chen appeared in the doorway. "Karen, there's someone here to see you." In the waiting area, Janet Peterson sat with her hands folded, looking remarkably composed for someone whose day had included fighting theft charges against her predecessor. She was smaller than Karen remembered, maybe 5'3" in sensible flats, with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Hello, Karen," Janet said quietly. "How are you holding up?" The kindness in her voice was almost unbearable. "You had me arrested, Janet." "I reported a theft. The arrest was your choice." Janet's voice remained gentle but firm. "Karen, we need to talk. About the HOA, about what happened, about what happens next." They sat across from each other in plastic chairs that creaked with every movement. Janet pulled out a manila folder, the same kind Karen had once used for violation reports. "The board met this morning," Janet began. "We've decided not to press charges if you're willing to return the sign and agree to some conditions." Karen's throat tightened. "What conditions?" "Counseling. Professional help to work through whatever's been driving your behavior. No contact with board members for 6 months. And," Janet hesitated, "you need to understand that your actions affected real people, Karen. Mrs. Henderson had a panic attack when you entered her house uninvited. The Kowalski family is considering moving because of your harassment over their garden choices." Each word hit like a physical blow. Karen had told herself she was protecting the community, maintaining standards, ensuring everyone's best interests. She'd never considered that her protection might feel like persecution. "I never meant to hurt anyone," Karen whispered. "I know, but intent doesn't erase impact." Janet leaned forward. "Karen, you're smart, organized, passionate about community service. Those are good qualities. But you lost sight of the line between helping and controlling." Through the window, Karen could see Lisa's car pulling into the parking lot. Her sister emerged, looking tired and worried, carrying a small overnight bag that promptly contained actual clothes for Karen's return to the world. "What do I do now?" Karen asked. Janet smiled, the first genuine warmth she'd shown. "You figure out who you are when you're not in charge of everyone else's business. It's scarier than it sounds, but also kind of liberating."